A guide to unpacking ELA standards. What does unpacking mean? Well, unpacking a standard is that process that you identify what students will know and be able to do when they've mastered the standard. This organizational chart shows how our ELA standards are set up in South Carolina. First, we have our strands. The strands that we have are inquiry, reading literary text, reading informational text, writing, and communication. Within each of the strands, we have the key ideas. With reading literary and reading informational text, we have principles of reading, meaning and context, language, craft, and structure, range and complexity. In writing, the key ideas are meaning, context, and craft, language, range, and complexity. And then in communication, we have meaning and context, language, craft, and structure. Within each of these key ideas, they're supported by one or more standard. And then each standard has an indicator which provides that specific outcome for the grade level. Let's look at Standard 6. Summarize key details and ideas to support analysis of thematic development. This standard is under the strand of reading literary text, and it's the key idea of meaning and context. Again, like I said before, the indicators convey what you have an outcome for each grade. Now, when we look at Standard 6, we see that each of the indicators continue to build on each other to support the standard. Let's look at a fourth grade indicator. Determine the development of a theme within a text and summarize using the key ideas. Of course, again, this is under Standard 6, and this shows us by you can look at the key. Reading literary, it's fourth grade, this is Standard 6, and Indicator 1. So let's first unpack the standard. Summarize key details and ideas to support analysis of thematic development. What does the student need to be able to do? That's where we're going to look at the verbs. In this case, we have summarize. What does the student need to know? Let's look at the nouns. Key details, ideas, thematic development. So we know what we're looking for in the standard. Now, if we're going to unpack the indicator for fourth grade under the standard, we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to look at those indicators in kindergarten through third grade. So let's look here together. First, in kindergarten, you look that they're describing the relationship between illustrations and text. Again, this standard is helping to build upon those concepts of print that we know we're working on in kindergarten. Looking at grade 1, we just describe the relationship between the illustrations and the character settings or events. Now we're getting into a little bit deeper in the components of the text and having the students to really look at the pictures and the character setting and events to understand the relationship. In grade 2, we're going to add some from illustrations, but also we're going to add the words in a print or in a multimedia text. And then again, that's going to help us to understand those character setting or plot. And then looking at grade 3 is where we determine the theme by recalling those key details that support the theme. So here you see you're building upon each of those each of the learning with the student to help them to master each of the indicators and to build on the standard. Let's look back again at that indicator for grade 4. Determine the development of a theme within a text. Summarize using key ideas. Now let's unpack that indicator. What does the student need to be able to do? Let's look at the verbs here. They're going to have to determine and summarize. But what is it that they're going to have to determine and summarize? Let's look at what the students need to know. They're going to need to know development of theme within a text, and they're going to have to know key details. Now, how is this going to look in the classroom? Of course, we're going to support students with a gradual release of responsibility. So let's think about think alouds during our read aloud. You will really be talking about the theme, the characters, the setting, events, how it's happening, how you determine that theme through looking at those components of the text. One thing that you might do in shared reading is to create an anchor chart that's theme versus main idea, because sometimes that's a concept that students get confused, that theme is not really the main idea, but explaining to them how that differs. Of course, during independent reading, you're going to confer with your readers and be sure that as they're reading their text, that they've selected on their own and that they're reading independently, that they understand the theme and that they're building on that to have that deeper underlying thought of the text. In writing, you might want to choose a mentor text and study the theme and how the author of that text was able to use the theme to develop the story. Remember, when planning, always use the standards to guide your curriculum, development, instructional practices, and assessments.